So, one of the general themes of this concert is going to be show tunes, and our first tune is 76 Trombones from the musical Music Man. If you don't know the story of this song, the background is that the character, Professor Harold Hill, is helping the townspeople visualize what a huge marching band could look like. So while a small marching band might have 10 musicians playing the trombone, or a larger one might have more than 30, the band he describes to the village includes 76 trombones, 110 cornets, more than 1,000 reeds, double bell euphoniums, which would have just been unimaginable. And then a cool fact is that in Wilson's hometown of Mason City, Iowa, there is a building called the Music Man Square next to it where he grew up. There is a room that has 76 donated trombones all hanging there. We're not quite that many, but we do have a lot of low brass, so that is part of the reason I pulled this one out. So we hope you enjoy 76 trombones. sing a little bit because it's Over the Rainbow, which is from a movie. Although, we'll get to it, it does connect. First written for the film in 1939, The Wizard of Oz, sung by Judy Garland. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Song, became her signature song. One thing that's pretty well known musically about the song is it has that big octave jump, somewhere, which is a really big jump. And I found a quote from a critic that said, "No one will want to sing or play a melody that begins with an octave leap." The melody that no one would want to sing or play is one of the most well-known songs in the world. Music teachers use that song to teach this is what an octave sounds like, and Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But obviously the critic didn't know it would end up becoming quite as popular as it is. This is Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So I cheated because I'm using this to lead into a song from a Broadway musical. We are doing selections from Wicked. Probably the most, if not one of the most famous current Broadway songs or musicals. And also we are halfway through a movie version of it because they stretched it even longer. So if you're not familiar with Wicked, it follows the story of the Wicked Witch from before when Dorothy goes to Oz and sort of explains a lot of the background. I won't spoil anything because the second movie hasn't come out. It comes out this November. But the songs you're going to hear in this are No One Mourns the Wicked, dancing through life, no good deed, for good, and defying gravity. So this is selections from Wicked. That is possibly one of the longest songs we've played in a while, at 257 measures. So, we're going to bring things down a little bit. Our next tune is an arrangement of Send in the Clowns from Sondheim's 1973 musical, A Little Night Music. I wasn't super familiar with this one, and if you're not, you might be surprised to know that they're not talking about a circus. The story is, this song is sung by a character, Desiree, who's reflecting on her life. Specifically, when she was younger, she rejected another character, Frederick, who was proposing to her for marriage years earlier, and he kept doing it, and she kept saying no. Now she realizes that she's ready to marry him, but he rejects her because now he's married to someone else. So when she's talking about sending the clown, she's talking about the fools, and it's always at the end of her situation.